Dear participants, hello everyone and welcome to today's academic English webinar, Common Problems for Non-English Speakers. My name is Aygerim. I am a PhD student at Nazarbayev University and I will be a moderator. I'm excited to be hosting this webinar and I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Andrey. Andrey holds a Master of Arts in Multilingual Education from Nazarbayev University and at the moment is pursuing a PhD in education at Nazarbayev University. His research interests include educational linguistics and English for academic purposes. Please feel free to pass this along to colleagues who may be interested and join our webinars. So now I hand the mic over to Andrey.
Well, thank you, Aygerim. I welcome you all, dear participants. I hope some of you have attended my previous session, and today we'll discuss some of the common mistakes that many non-English speaking academic writers make. I was sort of hoping some of you would send me a homework. Unfortunately, I didn't get any homework from the students of the previous session, but nevertheless, if you still want to get some feedback on your writing, you can. If you send me your homework by email provided in the first PowerPoint. All right. So in this session, if you have any questions or you want to answer a question that I ask, you can just raise your hand. I will give you voice and you can answer so everybody can hear. All right. And if you're not familiar, look in your software and find the button that corresponds to the raising hand function. Right, so let's begin. So in the first session, I discussed the 4 characteristics of academic writing. Can somebody remember what those 4 characteristics were? Let's just test this. Can somebody raise their hand and answer this question? Right, Aysura, can you?
Yes, hello everyone.
Hello.
I think they are task achieving, coherence and cohesion, grammar, spelling, the vocabulary set, therefore, characteristics.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Aysura. I think you were talking about the criteria for IELTS exam. This is a little bit different. The 4 characteristics of academic writing that we discussed in the first session were generally applicable to any academic writing. Does anybody else remember? Or who attended the first session? Nobody? That's okay. So I will just remind you, academic writing is different from any other type of writing because it is formal. You're supposed to use a particular type of language, not casual language that you would use in letter writing or emails to friends, etc. It is efficient, meaning that it doesn't contain any redundant language and it communicates the ideas in the minimum number of words possible. It's also modest. It means it does not include too much of the personality of the writer. Everything is done by referring to other people's ideas. And it is clear, it means that the writing is done in such a way that the reader of this writing has no problems understanding it. If you just focus on these 4 characteristics, anytime you are trying to write something for academic purposes, I think you will be halfway to success. But today we are going to speak about certain aspects of academic writing that often cause problems to non-English speakers. So first I'm going to talk about some style aspects, then some grammar, then some structure and content problems. And after that, we'll do some examples. I will give you some essays and you will read them and try to identify what the problems in these essays are. All right, so first, style. So as I already mentioned, academic writing is formal. Any writing is different from speaking, but academic writing is especially so. First of all, in academic writing, we never use any contractions. We don't use the words don't, or can't, or mustn't. We don't write etc. as etc. In fact, we never use the word etc. in academic writing. So instead, we write do not or cannot. Next one is we don't use colloquialisms or slang. Colloquialisms are words that are part of informal language that we use in speaking. For example, the word kids is not formal, so we're not supposed to use it in academic writing. Next one is avoid using phrasal verbs. For those of you who don't know, phrasal verbs are verbs consisting of 2 or 3 parts, an actual verb and then a particle, which is a preposition or an adverb. For example, go up is a phrasal verb. So these are also very expressive words that are used in speaking, but never in writing. Instead of go up, we are supposed to say increase. Instead of pick up, we say collect. Next, we avoid using pronouns, personal pronouns, to indicate generalizations. For instance, if you want to explain something, like how to use something in speaking, you say, you can do that and that. For example, you can see from the table. In this case, you, of course, doesn't mean your conversation partner. It means an abstract person. In academic writing, you don't use the word you in this way. You have to use a very formal language, like the table shows, or it can be seen from the table. And also very often used in Russian speakers writing the word our. You say our people or our country, our city. So in formal academic writing, you don't indicate an object by belonging to you or your group. You just say the actual word. So you say Kazakhstan, not our country. Then you try to avoid cliches and idioms. So cliches are sort of metaphorical phrases that are very often used in speaking in order to denote something that everybody knows, but to express these ideas in kind of artistic way, but normally not very creative. For example, many people in speaking would say the last but not least, just sort of to attract attention or to sound a bit, interesting or funny. So in academic writing, such cliches are not allowed. You have to say something formally. For this reason, you would say. In this case, you would use the word finally, for example. Right? We never use exclamation points or questions. So again, this is the purview of the speaking language. Academic writing is supposed to be emotionless, objective, sort of cool, and we don't engage in actual conversation. So questions are not really common in academic writing. It may be common in other types of writing where you sort of pretend to be speaking to a reader, but not in academic writing. Also avoid vague phrases like a bit, a lot, kind of, sort of. These are also very informal and they don't belong in academic writing. Avoid simple and broad terms or words that are very subjective. They don't use the words good or bad or big or small. Also, do not state opinions. So this is a very common problem in many students' academic writing. They think that they need to explicitly express their opinion by saying, in my opinion, such and such, or I strongly believe. In fact, some textbooks on IELTS recommend stating opinion in such a way, but in more advanced, like university essay type of writing, this is a mistake. You are not supposed to say things like, in my opinion, because everything that you write is kind of your opinion. But then it's not just your opinion, it's a substantiated statement based on your research of other people's opinions or other people's ideas. So you have to study literature and support all your claims in your writing with credit or reference to this literature. Not say that something is your opinion, because opinion means something unsubstantiated. So instead you would say, according to such and such scholar, when you are writing about an idea that you've read in a book or an academic article. And finally, do not use strong or direct language. So this means you don't make claims or statements that include all entities. You can't say absolutely or all, like all people do such and such thing, because this obviously is false, and making such a statement in academic writing would be falsification. Instead, you need to use special language called hedging and say most people or many people or often, and things like that. So these are things that you need to watch for, and these things are often encountered in non-English speaking people's writing, or in fact in English speaking writing also. But these are very common mistakes that I, in my experience, have encountered in students' writing. Right, now we'll talk a bit about punctuation. We all know that Russian language punctuation is very complex, and English language punctuation is much simpler. However, there are certain rules, and you need to follow them. There are some differences, although there are also similarities. I will highlight the differences that are often ignored or misunderstood. So first, in English, we always need to use and before the last item in a list. So if there are 3 or more items in a list, if there are only 2 items, no, or and is obvious. So for example, you wouldn't say John, David, Mary, like John, comma, David, comma, Mary. In Russian, this is possible, and in fact, in academic or formal writing, this is actually more common, not to use any and before the last item. In English, this is necessary. And also in most academic styles, for example, APA, you are supposed to use the so-called Oxford comma. The Oxford comma is a comma before the end, at the end of the list. For example, in the first list, John, David, and Mary, notice that there is a comma before end. So this is particularly characteristic to academic writing. And if you note, if you use Microsoft Word, for example, if you put this comma in, Microsoft Word would recommend that you delete this comma because it's set up as non-academic writing. But in academic, this is a good practice to use this Oxford comma because it actually helps to understand things. Look at the next example. Teachers, school administrators, and children and their parents. So here the list consists of actually 3 entities, where the last entity, children and their parents, consists of 2 sort of sub-items. So to indicate that children and their parents is an item on the same level as administrators, you would not use comma inside this entity. So there is no comma between children and, but to indicate that this double entity is one item at the end of the list, you would use Oxford comma after the word administrators. It sort of helps the reader to understand the structure of your list. And sometimes it helps you avoid confusion, right? Then this next rule about semicolon is also very common among people who are not used to writing in English. So in the English compound sentences, so compound sentences means they consist of two clauses. Like the simple example here, John likes apples, David hates them. So these are two clauses. The first is John likes apples, and the second clause is David hates them. So in English, you can write this sentence in two ways. You can use a conjunction, for example, while. And before the conjunction, you would use a comma. So John likes apples, comma, while David hates them. You also can write the sentence without a conjunction. In this case, you would have to use a semicolon. So if you use a comma instead of semicolon, so semicolon is this punctuation mark with a dot and a comma. So if you use just a normal comma, this would be a mistake, which has a special name in English. It's called the comma, what's it called? Splice, sorry, it's a comma splice. So if you have two clauses inside a sentence and there is no conjunction between them, that is and, but, while, however, etc., you have to use a semicolon. But you only use the semicolon to combine clauses that relate to each other. So in this example, John likes apples and David hates them. These are ideas that are related to each other. So it's reasonable to include them in one sentence. But if the ideas are not related to each other, then you would not connect them into a compound sentence and separate with a semicolon. In fact, you just split them into two separate sentences. As in the following example, John likes apples, David doesn't cook. So these are completely different ideas. You don't connect them in one sentence. Otherwise, that would be a very strange sentence and also a mistake. Right, and very often, Russian speakers especially use commas where they're not necessary because they're just used to putting a lot of commas in the Russian language. In English, we don't use as many. For me personally, the most frustrating is when people put comma after the word although. And normally you would use although in this way, although one thing, comma, and a contrasting thing. Although I like ice cream, comma, I don't eat it every day. So there is only one comma that separates the two clauses. There is no comma after although. Another frustrating thing is putting commas around such as vegetables, comma, such as, comma, potatoes. So obviously you only use one comma before such as, not after. But there are many other such examples where people tend to put commas where they don't belong. Usually common sense and proofreading would help you eliminate these extra commas quite easily. All right, now I'm going to talk about some grammatical problems. First, parallel structures. So parallel structures are lists, usually lists of items or lists of sentences or phrases that have a similar grammatical structure. So very often people put things in these parallel structures like lists of items that are not from the same grammatical class. as in this example, I like swimming, jogging, and football, right? So if you do not have this word football here, suppose I didn't have, so I didn't have the word playing here. Yes? That would be a mistake, because swimming and jogging are gerunds. Yes? They are not nouns. They're this strange object that exists between the noun and the verb. Whereas football is just a noun. They belong to different grammatical classes and they cannot be used in the same list. So to make this sentence correct, you would say, I like swimming, jogging, and playing football. So by introducing playing, which is also a gerund, you make the list homogeneous. So all the items in the list are now gerunds. So you need to be careful when you write lists and other types of parallel structures. Now, parallel structures may also be a repetition of a similar type of sentence. So you need to be careful that the grammatical structure of these repeated sentences is the same. Right. The next one is about negatives. So in English, we normally apply the negative to the first verb. So just to make this clear, I will give you the example. Here, they expected the costs not to rise. So this, if you translate it to Russian, word by word, this would sound like a perfectly natural sentence. You say, они ожидали, что цены не возрастут. But in English, this sounds a bit unnatural. You would rather say they did not expect the costs to rise. So notice that if you can move the negative to the beginning of the sentence without affecting the meaning, this would be preferable because it clarifies the meaning. It makes it more natural and easier to understand. And in general, about negatives, if you can avoid using negatives, you should do that. Instead of using the word, two words, not effective, you should use ineffective. Instead of saying, if not, for example, if you don't come on time, you say, unless you come on time. So this general rule of using fewer words where it is possible applies everywhere in academic writing. There's another example here. They did not pass the test. So instead of saying not pass, you can say fail. And the sentence becomes shorter and clearer. Say they failed the test. All right. Then English, unlike Russian, is a verb-oriented language. So in English, the most important word in a sentence is always the verb. Whereas in Russian, nouns are more important. In Russian, it is easier or more natural to express ideas through nouns. Whereas in English, it is more natural to express the ideas through verbs. So if it is possible to express the same idea through a verb, you should do that. Not only is it natural, more dynamic, but it also reduces the number of words. Instead of saying an analysis of the data was conducted, you would say the data were analyzed. Replace the word analysis with analyze, verb, make the sentence shorter and the idea clearer. just to give another comment about this rule, this often happens when people think in Russian first. They compose the sentence in their head in Russian and then translate it word by word into English. And this results in such long and unnatural sentences. Always proofread whatever you've written and pay attention to this idea that verbs are more important and more preferable than nouns. Next is about fragments. So fragments are incomplete sentences. So in English, unless a sentence is an imperative, imperative means like a command, open the window is an imperative. A sentence must contain both subject and a verb. But since in academic writing we don't write imperatives, all sentences in academic writing must contain a subject and verb. If they miss, or if they lack one of these, then they are not sentences, they are fragments. Here is an example. Stephen does not like vegetables, for example, carrots and onions. The first sentence is okay, it's a full sentence with subject and verb, whereas the next one is not actually a sentence. So you might consider carrots and onions as subjects, but there is no verb, so this is not a complete sentence. And this happens quite often, especially when students write very long sentences or these fragments that can consist of very long lists of items with some control inside them. And they often just don't notice that there is a verb missing or something else is missing. So proofreading is very important, and it's easy to notice if you're just careful enough. So the opposite of that is an overrun sentence. Overrun sentence means a sentence that is grammatically correct, but extremely long and complex in its structure. So if a sentence is extremely long, the reader would have to read it several times in order to understand it, and may even interpret it incorrectly. This causes frustration to the reader, maybe possible miscommunication. It's bad style to write it like this. And it is very common in Russian speakers writing, because in Russian it's considered good manner to write long and complex sentences, because such writers think this is a demonstration of their intellect and writing ability. Quite the opposite in English. The next one is misplaced or hanging modifiers. So you can easily identify these if you proofread, because they just completely mess up the logic of a sentence if they exist. So let's look at this example. While writing an essay, the structure is particularly important. It's quite easy to write a sentence like this. At first glance, this is a very reasonable sentence. The idea is clear. However, there's something off here. Who can say what the problem with the sentence is? You can raise your hand and I will give you the sound. Anybody? There's, sorry. Anybody? I just saw a hand and then it disappeared. I will give you, oh, sorry.
Yes.
What do you think is wrong with the sentence?
It was the first one. An analysis of the data was conducted.
No. The one about while writing an essay, the structure
is particularly important. What is wrong? I think I think there is no need to put a comma. Yes, am I right? Or maybe it's not completed one. While writing essays, the structure is particularly important. What's wrong?
Incomplete sentence. So is there a subject here? What do you see any subject?
In the first clause, essay, in the second, structure. They are the subjects. But while writing essay, I think there is no. You mustn't put a comma.
So you think if you just remove comma, everything will be okay?
No, I think there is something missed. Idea.
Yes, something wrong. Yes.
Yes, I think, but I can't say what exactly while writing.
Okay. Thank you, Aygul. Does anybody else have? I think Damir wants to say something. Yes. Damir, can you turn on your sound? Damir, I just gave you the right to speak. You can turn on your sound.
Hello.
Hello, Damir.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So you should. There's a misplace of the two structures of the sentence. You have to write this the sentence in this position. The structure of the particular important while writing an essay.
So you think you need to just rearrange the order?
Yep.
Okay, that's another idea. Thank you.
And for that reason, it will be sound more natural, because you never say the reason first and the main idea after that. You have to rearrange it. Yeah, my idea is so.
All right, just rearrange the parts. Thank you, Damir. Let's listen to Ajar. Ajar?
Hello. Do you hear me?
Ajar? What is your idea?
Do you hear me?
Yes.
So I also think that we should, the first sentence, we should put like, while writing an essay, it should be in the end of the sentence. And in the second one, before the word which, we shouldn't put any commas.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Ajar. I will turn you off. Right. So in fact, so this first part here, while writing an essay, it is called a modifier. I'll just for this part, while writing an essay. So I need to choose color. Right. Modifier. Modifier means a phrase that modifies a word in a sentence. So it explains or clarifies some characteristic of a word. So when you say, while writing an essay, so this phrase needs to explain or describe something else in the sentence. So if you write it like this, it's supposed to explain the word structure, yes? But structure cannot write. That is the mistake. This is a misplaced modifier because this modifier modifies the word structure, but logically it cannot apply to the word structure. The structure doesn't write. Only a person can write. So instead, you should say, while writing an essay, the student must remember that structure is important. because the student is the person who does the writing. So this modifier should connect to the word student. So is this clear? So modifiers are phrases that describe something else in the sentence. So, and if this something else is missing, the sentence doesn't make sense. For example, if I say, while eating, I, what do I do while eating? Or while walking, I usually listen to music. So this phrase, while walking, is a modifier describing the action of I, yes? Because I do the walking. So if I say, while walking, listening to music is enjoyable, it doesn't make sense because music doesn't do the walking, right? So here's another example. So this one is a bit different. So I will read the sentence to you first. We usually go to the shop across the street, which is open 24 hours per day in the morning. Okay. So this, so if you just look at this, it doesn't make sense. It says it's open 24 hours per day in the morning. Morning does not contain 24 hours. So this sentence is a bit confused. So what makes this sentence confused and how can we correct it to make it meaningful and maybe express the idea that the writer originally meant? I will give you the voice. Do you have an answer? I will. No? Well, Ajar wrote in the chat saying he's open 24/7, but will it be academic? No, it would still make no sense. You say something is open 24/7 in the morning. It's contradictory. It's either in the morning or 24/7.
You should omit.
Okay. Aysura?
I think you should omit the phrase in the morning. Put the full stop after the day. We don't use the phrase in the morning because, as you said, it's wrong. It's not logical.
But the writer had some idea when he or she was writing the word in the morning. Yes.
Why did she write in the morning?
What can you guess? What her idea was? Here, Alia says in the morning should be before comma. Means we usually go to the shop across the street in the morning, which is open 24 hours per day. I think you're on the right track, but I wouldn't put it before the comma. I would put it in the beginning of the sentence. I would say in the morning, we usually go to the shop across the street, which is open 24 hours per day. Does that make sense now? So why does it make sense now? Because in the morning is a modifier which describes not the shop, it describes us or us going to the shop. In the morning is the time when we do the shopping. 24 hours per day are the opening hours of the shop. So these two modifiers apply to different things. So by placing in the morning, which is supposed to apply to the word we at the end of the sentence, we confuse the reader. So we have to move it closer to the word we. So if you put it before the word we in the beginning of the sentence, it becomes clearer. Yes? So the idea here is people often misplace these modifiers. So in their head, everything is clear, but because they put it in the wrong place, the reader cannot interpret the sentence correctly. So when the person who wrote this sentence was doing it, she understood it perfectly because she didn't read it twice. But we, who didn't have the idea in our head before this, are confused because the modifier is misplaced, right? So it might be a bit confusing, but if you think about this a little later, it might be clearer. It's nothing, it's not complex grammar or anything. It's just common sense. You just look at a phrase that describes one object and you put it next to this object rather than to some other object. All right. Okay, now I would like you to look at these examples and identify the error. No, don't. I get him. It's too early. Don't go to this web links yet. Just look at the slide. I have 3 sentences in the slide. Look at the sentences and say what the problems are and how to correct these problems. The first one is, in 1952, Japan's gross national product was 1/3 that of France. By the late 1970s, it was larger than the GNPs of France and Britain combined. So what is the problem? Who wants to say? You can write either in the chat. You can either write in the chat or raise your hand. So Alia wrote 1/3 of France, know that. No, I think this is correct. 1/3, that replaces the word gross national product. In order not to repeat this long phrase, you just use the word that. Aria has some idea. She says we should use a semicolon instead of comma. And this is correct. Akmaral also talks about this. So we have 2 independent clauses which are not connected by a conjunction. The first is Japan's gross national product was such and such, and then it was larger than blah, blah, blah. So we have 2 independent clauses, no conjunction. So we have to use semicolon, not a comma. Very good. Now let's look at the second one. The term scientific illiteracy has become almost a cliche in educational circles. What is the problem here? Akmaral says extra commas, and this is correct. Which one? We have 3 commas here. Which ones are extra? Which one is extra? No comma before in educational circles. This is correct. Is this the only one that is not necessary? And the first one also, yes? The term, no comma, scientific illiteracy, because this is one object, the term scientific literacy. What about the comma after illiteracy? This is also not necessary. It doesn't separate, because the term scientific literacy is subject and has become a verb. you can't use a comma, you can't put a comma between the subject and the verb. So in fact, all these three commas are redundant. Right? No commas anywhere. Next one is, so this one we didn't talk about, but you should spot it if you are good at English grammar. The news about coronavirus are reported hourly on national television. Very good, Alia and Lunara. Aisura, several people said instead of are, we need to use is, because the word the news is singular. So this is also a very common problem. It's called the subject-verb agreement. So you have to be very careful about using plural verb with singular subject or plural subject with singular verb. So some words such as the news or police are tricky. They look like plural or singular, where in fact they are the opposite. Right, this is good. Next one. The candidates' goals include winning the election, a national health program, and the educational system. What is the problem in this sentence? So the problem with parallel structures. So why is it a problem? So we have a list, yes? We have winning the election, national health program, and the educational system. So which one is odd out? Which one doesn't fit? The national health program. So let's look at the grammatical properties of these items. So the first one, winning the election. What part of speech is it? Or what grammatical class is the phrase? So winning, what is it? It's a gerund. The national health program. What is it? National health program. Yes, these are nouns, yes? Program and system are nouns. So how can we correct it? So we can't have gerund and two nouns. We have to have three similar things. So we can't turn winning into a noun. No, if you say election winning, it still is a gerund. So we can't turn a gerund into a noun, but we can always add a gerund to a noun. So we can leave winning the election. Akmaral says improving a national health program, that is good. And the educational system, what can you do? You wouldn't say improving again, you would say something else, just to avoid repetition. Developing, okay, so you can say winning the election, developing a national health program, and improving the educational system, enhancing, very good, reforming, another option. All right, I think you've got the hang of that one. What about the next sentence? When writing a proposal, an original task is set for research. What is the problem here? Misplaced modifier. Where is the modifier? While writing, yes, while writing a proposal. So, okay, so Alia says you or student is missing. Can somebody write the whole sentence so it would make sense? Can you rewrite the sentence so that it is correct, it makes sense? Anybody? Okay, Akmaral says, when writing a proposal, one should set the task for research. That's very good, yeah. Or Akirke said, when writing a proposal, one should set an original task for research. Right? Rana Nur says, it is important to set an original task for research. So what happened to when writing a proposal? So you can't just cross out part of the sentence. You have to leave it. You have to add something. I think Akirke and Akmaral had good ideas. So when writing a proposal, one should set the task for research, or an original task for research. Although I would say, Akmaral, you shouldn't use the word you in academic writing. You say you should, it's informal. You can do it in speaking, but not in writing. One should is okay. Or you can say the student should, or the writer should. Right. And the last one is scientists report no human deaths due to how do you use? Right. Scientists report no human deaths due to excessive caffeine consumption, although caffeine does cause convulsions and death in certain animals. Right. So what is wrong here? All right. So, Lunara says there is no verb in the first sentence. In the first sentence, there is a verb. Scientists report. Scientist is the subject. Report is the verb. I think the problem is with the second one. What do you think? So the second one, sorry, just scrolled too fast, needs another clause. No human deaths are reported. Yeah, I think Arya is a very simple solution. You just join the two sentences. So because the nature of the word although implies that you need to have two clauses inside the sentence. Remember, I was talking about although, then one clause, comma, another clause. So here we have only one clause after although, which is not correct. This is a violation of the structure of a sentence with the word although. So instead of having two sentences, one of which is incomplete, you just join them together and you have two clauses. One clause, scientists report no human deaths, and the other, caffeine does cause convulsions in certain animals. So these are opposing statements, and they're joined with the word although, which plays its part absolutely correctly. Okay, so you just put a comma after the word consumption and continue the sentence with a small letter although. All right. And the last one. It's not the last one yet. So this very long one, because early childhood defined as the first 5 years, defined as the first, I have too many windows, years of one's life is a critical time in terms of not only physical but also social development. Studies have focused on studies have focused a significant amount of attention on this period, and this section discusses researchers' key findings and their implications for the current study. So what is wrong? It is overrun, as Lunara says. Can you suggest a revision of this sentence? You don't need to write the whole thing, it's quite long. Can you just give me some ideas how to change it? The shop, what do you mean shop in the morning? It's we've finished with that example. Maybe separate, yes, how to separate. Studies a new sentence. But then it would be an incomplete sentence because early childhood, defined as blah, 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 is a critical time. And then we have a clause that starts with because and no other clause. Because needs two clauses, yes? Cause and effect. We only have cause. Omit because. I think we need to do some more revision here. So I would do it like this. Early childhood is defined as the first 5 years of one's life. Let's say full stop here. It is critical in terms of not only physical, but also social development. So, studies have focused a significant amount of attention on this period. And then full stop again. This section discusses researchers' key findings and their implications for the current study. I would turn it into 3 sentences, but keep the idea that there is a cause and effect relationship between 2 things. This early childhood is critical, and then studies have focused attention. You need to connect these with either because or so. All right? And let's do the last one. Baseline data were collected on 1 day. Data were also collected after 1 week. The measurements were taken at 9 a.m. And this was done every day. What is the problem here? Yes, so these are too short. Yes, this is the opposite of overrun. These sentences are underdeveloped, and since the ideas are separated, this creates too many words. If we combine them together, we will reduce the number of words significantly. So you can say, baseline data were collected on day 1 and after 1 week. And then the measurements were taken at 9 a.m. every day. We combine first and second sentence and then third and fourth and reduce the size of the text considerably. All right. I think we won't have time to go through, we only have 2 minutes left. I wanted to go through some problems with structure, with some examples. Instead, I will just announce the problems, and when you download the PowerPoints, you will also get the examples and you can do the exercises yourself. So here are very common problems that I personally encounter quite frequently in my students' writing. The first is no clear introduction. We've discussed introductions and conclusions in our first session, and this is one of the most serious problems in many people's writings. They don't understand what an introduction and what a conclusion should be. If you go back to that session and revise what should go into introduction, you will write your position in the introduction and the roadmap for what the essay is going to argue. And also the conclusion should always exist in the essay, it can't be missing, and it should be appropriate. It means that it should summarize the ideas, not include any new ideas or a new line of argument. And it's very common of Russian-speaking students. They often think that conclusion is the place where you express your opinion, as if the rest of the essay was somebody else's opinion. So everything is, all the essay is the product of your intellectual effort. But it is not your opinion, it is your analysis based on evidence, based on what you've read in the literature. So never write the words, in my opinion, especially in the conclusion. Because with this, you suggest that everything you wrote before the conclusion is not your opinion, or is plagiarism or something. Next big problem is lack of signposting, the linking words, or abuse of signposting. Very often students go through IELTS courses and they learn these long lists of linking words and they try to use them in every sentence, sometimes twice in every sentence. This is abuse. You should never just use linking words for the sole purpose of using them. They always need to be appropriately used. And of course, they need help us, they need help the reader understand your line of thought and argument, so that they need to guide the reader, not confuse. And of course, the problems with poorly constructed paragraphs. I think you have discussed the structure of paragraphs, and every paragraph should contain a topic sentence, which is the idea to which the paragraph is devoted to. Paragraph should not include 2 ideas or 3 ideas. It can only include 1 idea, and this idea should be explicitly and clearly stated in the first sentence, which is called the topic sentence. And very often people don't do this. They write the topic sentence at the end, or don't write the topic sentence at all, which makes the paragraph confusing and unfocused and really difficult to interpret. And then very often paragraphs are very short with little development. So this happens very often when students learn to write topic sentence, and they often finish the paragraph with that. They just write a topic sentence and end of paragraph. This is wrong. You need to provide supporting evidence and relevant examples. Plus, you need to connect these examples and evidence to the topic sentence with linking words, with your logical reasoning. Then another very common problem, this is a big problem, when the whole part of your essay, or actually the whole essay, can be irrelevant to the topic. This means that when you read the task or the subject, you didn't really understand it or pay sufficient attention, and you started writing whatever came to your mind without thinking clearly about the purpose. And also a problem is descriptive and unsubstantiated essay, when there is no analysis, no reference to literature, no examples or evidence, just sort of statements of ideas, not very well connected. And finally, plagiarism, which is a topic of its own. So these are the common problems that I recommend that you go through again, and next time you do any writing, you think about these and try not to make them. So here at the end of the last slide, I include links to 2 example essays. We were going to analyze these in this session, but unfortunately when we ran out of time, I didn't plan this very well. But at home you can download these and check them against the mistakes that I have presented to you in this PowerPoint presentation, and try to improve the writing in these essays. And if you have any questions, you can always email them to me, and I'll be happy to help. With this, I conclude my session. Thank you very much for your attention and active participation. Yes, Alia, I will, not I personally, the slides will be made available to you later on, but you need to send an email to gse@nu.edu.kz and request the PowerPoint slides, and then they will send it to your email.
Thank you, Andrey, for your excellent presentation. Dear participants, thank you for joining us. If you have a question for our speaker, please feel free to send it through the Ask a Question tab at the bottom. And if we do not get to your question during today's webinar, we will be sure to follow up afterward. All presentations from our webinars will be available on GSE website, gsc.nu.edu.kz, or available upon request at gsc@nu.edu.kz. And I would like to inform you that please join us tomorrow. We will have webinars on IELTS QA session at 11 a.m. And the second webinar will be at 3 p.m., logical and structured writing. Thank you for joining us. Andrey, thanks again for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you very much, Andrey, for your support, and
enjoyed
to the participants for their participation.
Yeah, thank you so much. So if you don't have any questions, we will finish this webinar and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a nice evening. Thank you, Andrey. Goodbye.
Goodbye.